My wife, Celeste, claimed her new tennis instructor was just helping her technique. But when I showed up at the club with surprise roses, I caught them in a passionate kiss. What happened next turned their fairy tale romance into a complete nightmare. Never underestimate a betrayed husband with connections. My name is Garrett Whitlock. I'm 43 years old, and I own a podcast studio here in Denver. 18 years ago, I married Celeste, thinking I'd found my partner for life. She was beautiful, ambitious, and had this laugh that could light up a room. Back then, I thought we were unbreakable. The first sign something was off came last spring. Celeste announced she was taking up tennis. Now, understand, my wife had never shown interest in sports. She'd mock me for watching football on Sundays, claiming it was a waste of time. So when she suddenly decided she needed to get in shape, and tennis was the answer, I was surprised but supportive. I found this amazing instructor, Celeste said one evening, practically glowing as she sorted through tennis outfits. His name is Donovan Pierce, and he's worked with semi-professional players. He thinks I have natural talent. I glanced up from my laptop where I was editing a podcast episode. That's great, honey. I'm glad you found something you enjoy. She held up a short white tennis skirt, examining it in the mirror. Donovan says the right equipment makes all the difference. He's very particular about form and technique. Something about the way she said his name, this soft, almost reverent tone, made me pause. But I pushed the feeling aside. Over the next few weeks, tennis became Celeste's obsession. She'd come home from sessions energized in a way I hadn't seen in years. Her cheeks would be flushed, and she'd chatter nonstop about her lessons. Donovan adjusted my grip today, she'd say, demonstrating the motion. He has such strong hands. Really knows how to position you properly. I started noticing other changes too. Celeste began critiquing things about our life that had never bothered her before. She complained that I'd gotten too comfortable, too settled. Donovan says men lose their edge after 40. She mentioned one evening during dinner. He thinks it's because they stop pushing themselves physically and mentally. I set down my fork, feeling irritated. And what does Donovan think about married men who work 60 hours a week to provide for their families? Celeste shrugged, not catching my sarcasm. He thinks successful people make time for everything that matters to them. When I suggested coming to watch one of her tennis sessions, she quickly dismissed the idea. Oh, you'd be bored, she said, waving me off. Besides, Donovan prefers his students to focus without distractions. The more she talked about her mysterious tennis instructor, the more uneasy I became. But I told myself I was being paranoid. Celeste was my wife. We'd been together for 18 years. I should have trusted my instincts. The tennis obsession escalated faster than I could have imagined. What started as 3 sessions a week became daily training. Celeste would leave the house at dawn for conditioning and return home glowing like she'd discovered the fountain of youth. Donovan thinks I should compete, she announced one Tuesday evening, twirling into our kitchen like some teenager fresh from prom. He says I have natural athleticism that most people develop over years. I was preparing dinner, something that had become my responsibility since tennis consumed her schedule. Compete? Honey, you've been playing for 2 months. That's exactly what makes it so exciting. Celeste exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Donovan believes in pushing boundaries. He says conventional timelines are for conventional people. There it was again, Donovan's wisdom being quoted like scripture. I set down the knife I'd been using to chop vegetables and turned to face my wife fully. Speaking of Donovan, I said carefully, I'd love to meet this miracle worker who's transformed you so completely. Maybe I could come watch a lesson this week. The change in Celeste's expression was instantaneous. The bright smile faltered, replaced by something guarded. Oh, that's sweet, but you wouldn't enjoy it. Tennis lessons are pretty boring to watch. Plus, Donovan runs a very focused program. No distractions allowed. I'm hardly a distraction, I replied, feeling my patience wearing thin. I'm your husband of 18 years. I think I can handle watching you hit some balls. Celeste waved her hand dismissively. You just don't understand the tennis world, Garrett. It's very specialized. Donovan has specific methods, and he doesn't like outsiders disrupting the energy. The energy. Right. I turned back to the vegetables, gripping the knife handle tighter than necessary. Besides, she continued, apparently oblivious to my growing frustration, Donovan thinks I should focus entirely on improvement right now. He says I have potential that could really go somewhere if I commit fully. And what exactly does commit fully mean? I asked. Well, he thinks I should enter some local tournaments. Maybe travel to a few competitions in other states. Nothing too serious at first, but you have to start somewhere, right? Travel. Overnight trips with her tennis instructor. The pieces were falling into place in a way that made my stomach turn. Celeste, I said, turning around again, don't you think this is all moving pretty fast? 6 months ago, you'd never touched a tennis racket. Now you're talking about traveling for competitions. Her face hardened. This is exactly what Donovan warned me about. He said people close to me might try to hold me back out of jealousy or fear of change. I'm not trying to hold you back. I'm trying to understand why my wife has become a completely different person. I haven't changed, she shot back. I've just finally found something that makes me feel alive again. Maybe if you took some risks instead of sitting in that studio all day, you'd understand what growth feels like. The words hit like a slap. This from the woman who'd supported my business for years, who'd celebrated every milestone with me. I ignored every warning sign screaming in my head and let her walk away that night. I should have confronted the truth right then and there. A man can only take so much before he needs answers. After weeks of Celeste's behavior becoming more erratic, I decided to do something romantic. Surprise her at the tennis club with flowers. Maybe seeing her in her element would help me understand this transformation. I picked up a bouquet of white roses, her favorites, and drove to the prestigious Pinnacle Tennis Club, where she'd been spending most of her time. The place screamed money, manicured courts, valet parking, members who looked like they belonged in country club magazines. I'm here to surprise my wife, Celeste Whitlock, I told the receptionist. She's having a lesson with Donovan Pierce. The young woman behind the desk looked uncomfortable. They're not on the courts right now. They might be in the clubhouse cafe taking a break. I thanked her and walked toward the cafe, flowers in hand, feeling pretty good about my grand gesture. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I spotted them immediately. My wife was sitting at a corner table with a man who had to be Donovan. Tall, athletic build, the kind of guy who probably never had a day of self-doubt in his life. But what stopped me cold wasn't his appearance. It was what they were doing. Celeste was leaning across the table, her hand covering his. As I watched, frozen in place, Donovan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it softly. Then she reached up and touched his face with such tenderness that my stomach dropped to my feet. This wasn't a tennis lesson. This wasn't even close to innocent. They were completely absorbed in each other, talking in hushed tones like lovers sharing secrets. When Donovan leaned forward and kissed her, really kissed her, I felt something die inside my chest. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, watching my wife of 18 years betray everything we'd built together. The roses felt heavy in my hands, suddenly ridiculous. They never saw me. I turned around and walked out of that place like a ghost, my legs moving automatically while my brain tried to process what I'd witnessed. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 30 minutes, staring at nothing. Those roses ended up in a dumpster behind a gas station on my way home. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. If Celeste wanted to play games, I'd show her what a real player looked like. When she came home that evening, glowing and full of stories about her challenging lesson, I smiled and nodded like the fool she thought I was. But inside, I was already planning my next move. Watching your wife lie to your face while you know the truth is a special kind of torture. Celeste walked through our front door that evening with the same post-tennis glow, chattering about her breakthrough with her backhand technique. Donovan says I'm progressing faster than any student he's ever had, she said, not meeting my eyes as she headed straight for the shower. He thinks I might be ready for intermediate tournaments sooner than expected. I nodded from the couch, keeping my voice steady. That's great, honey. You sound like quite the teacher. Oh, he is, she replied, and I caught that dreamy tone again. He has this way of making you believe you can achieve anything. Yeah, I bet he does. For the next 3 days, I played the role of the oblivious husband perfectly. I asked about her lessons, complimented her new tennis outfits, and even suggested she invite Donovan over for dinner sometime. That's sweet, Celeste said, but he's very private. Doesn't really socialize with students outside the club. The lies came so easily to her now. It was impressive in a sick way. Meanwhile, I started making calls. The first was to my sister Sloane, who happened to be one of the best divorce attorneys in Colorado. She specialized in high-stakes cases where people try to hide assets or pull fast ones on their spouses. Garrett. Sloane's voice was surprised when she answered. This is unexpected. What's going on? I need your help, I said, sitting in my office at the studio after hours. But this stays between us for now. Of course. What kind of help? The kind that involves my wife and another man. There was a pause. Oh, Garrett. I'm so sorry. Are you sure? I saw them together. It's not speculation anymore. Sloane's voice shifted into professional mode. Okay. First rule, don't confront her yet. We need to document everything and protect her assets. Can you come to my office tomorrow? The next morning, I sat across from my sister in her downtown law firm, feeling like I was planning a military operation. Sloane had always been the fighter in our family, sharp, strategic, and absolutely ruthless when someone crossed her clients. Here's what we're going to do, she said, spreading papers across her desk. We start moving assets immediately. Everything that's jointly owned needs to be secured. The house, the business, savings accounts, all of it. Is that legal? Perfectly legal when it's your money to begin with, she replied. We're not stealing anything. We're protecting what you've earned. She leaned forward, her expression serious. Garrett, if she's planning to leave you for this guy, she's probably already thinking about how to maximize her payout. We need to be 3 steps ahead. What about the tennis instructor? Sloane's smile was predatory. Oh, we'll definitely be looking into Mr. Donovan Pierce. Men like that usually have patterns, and patterns leave evidence. As I drove home that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: control. Celeste thought she was playing me, but she had no idea what was coming. That evening, when she announced another late-night training session, I just smiled and told her to have fun. She had no clue the game had already changed. The beauty of owning your own business is understanding money flow. While Celeste continued her charade of tennis lessons, I systematically dismantled our joint financial life. Sloane had given me a roadmap. First, I transferred our savings to an account solely in my name, money I'd earned building my podcast studio from nothing. Next, I restructured business assets, ensuring everything was protected under corporate ownership. The house is trickier, Sloane explained during our second meeting. It's jointly owned, but Colorado law favors the primary breadwinner in adultery cases. Good thing I have documentation, I replied, sliding photos across her desk, pictures the private investigator had taken of Celeste and Donovan together. Sloane whistled low. They're not exactly being discreet. Apparently, love makes you stupid. Meanwhile, Celeste remained blissfully unaware. She'd started staying out later, claiming Donovan was preparing her for a tournament in Aspen next month. It's such an amazing opportunity, she gushed one evening, texting someone. Donovan has connections with tournament organizers all over the state. That's wonderful, honey, I replied, cutting my steak with perhaps more force than necessary. I'm sure you'll both enjoy the trip. The comment went right over her head. That weekend, I discovered something crucial. Donovan Pierce was married. His wife, Lauren, was apparently unaware of her husband's extracurricular activities. This is perfect, Sloane said when I shared this information. A married man seducing clients? That's professional misconduct. I spent Sunday doing reconnaissance, following Donovan home. He lived in an upscale neighborhood, in a beautiful colonial with expensive cars in the driveway. More importantly, I saw his wife, blonde, attractive, mid-30s, playing with 2 young children in the front yard. 2 kids. This garbage was risking his family for an affair with my wife. I sat in my truck watching this domestic scene, feeling my anger crystallize into something cold and calculating. Donovan Pierce was about to learn that actions have consequences. That evening, when Celeste announced she was meeting the girls for drinks, a transparent lie, I simply nodded. You're being awfully supportive lately, she said, pausing at the door. I believe in supporting the people I love, I replied, even when they make choices I don't understand. She gave me a quick kiss and disappeared into the night, rushing off to meet her tennis instructor. What she didn't know was that tomorrow, her secret was about to become very public knowledge. The game was about to change dramatically. Monday morning arrived with perfect Colorado sunshine. I felt calm driving to Sloane's office, carrying an envelope that would detonate Celeste's carefully constructed double life. You're sure about this? Sloane asked, reviewing the documents. Once we do this, there's no going back. She made her choice, I replied. Now she lives with the consequences. The first bomb was simple. Divorce papers filed that morning, citing adultery with photographic evidence. The second bomb was more creative. The Pinnacle Tennis Club had strict policies about instructor conduct with members. Sexual relationships with clients meant immediate termination. But the nuclear option was my masterpiece. That afternoon, I drove to Donovan's neighborhood with a manila envelope for Lauren Pierce. Inside were copies of the investigators' photos, along with a simple note. Thought you should know what your husband does during his private lessons. I left the envelope in her mailbox and drove away. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Celeste was hysterical. "Garrett, something terrible has happened," she sobbed. "Donovan's wife found out about our friendship, and she's caused this huge scene at the club. He's been fired." "That's awful, honey," I said, injecting concern into my voice. "What kind of friendship could cause that much trouble?" There was a pause. "It's complicated. We became close during training, and people misunderstood." "Misunderstood how?" Another pause. "Garrett, I need to tell you something. I've been confused lately, and I think I made some mistakes." "What kind of mistakes, Celeste?" "I think I should come home. We need to talk." "Of course. Take your time. I'll be here." When Celeste walked through our front door an hour later, her face was red and blotchy from crying. She looked like a woman whose world had just collapsed. "Garrett," she began, then stopped, apparently unsure how to continue. "Yes, I've done something terrible. I betrayed you, and I don't know how to fix it." I set down my drink and looked at her for what I knew would be the last time as her husband. "I know," I said simply. Her face went white. "You know, I've known for weeks, Celeste. I saw you together at the tennis club." The confession hit her like a physical blow. She sank onto our couch, burying her face in her hands. "Oh God, Garrett, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen." "But it did happen," I replied, my voice steady. "And now we both have to live with the consequences." She looked up with desperate eyes. "Can we fix this? Can we try counseling, or—" "No," I said firmly. "Some things can't be fixed, Celeste. Some betrayals are too deep." That's when I handed her the divorce papers. The week following Celeste's confession was a masterclass in controlled demolition. While she stayed at her sister's house, desperately trying to salvage her relationship with the now unemployed Donovan, I worked with Sloan to ensure their problems were just beginning. "His termination from the tennis club is only the start," Sloan explained during our morning meeting. "I've filed a complaint with the Colorado Tennis Association about his conduct. That'll make it nearly impossible for him to work at any reputable club in the state." I leaned back in her office chair, feeling oddly satisfied. "What about his wife's divorce proceedings?" "Lauren Pierce hired Patricia Reynolds. She's ruthless," Sloan replied with approval. "Donovan's going to lose his house, his kids, and probably half his future earnings. Men who cheat with multiple clients don't fare well in family court." Meanwhile, Celeste had been calling me nonstop, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. I listened to them while editing podcast episodes, finding a strange comfort in her panic. "Garrett, please call me back," her voice pleaded through my speakers. "I know you're angry, but we need to talk about this rationally. Donovan says we can work through this together if we just communicate properly." Donovan says. Even now, facing the destruction of both their lives, she was still quoting her tennis instructor like he had answers. The breaking point came when she showed up at my studio unannounced Thursday afternoon. I was in the middle of recording an interview with a local entrepreneur when she burst through the door, looking wild-eyed and desperate. "Garrett, we need to talk right now," she demanded, completely ignoring my guest and the recording equipment. I calmly ended the interview, apologized to my confused guest, and waited until we were alone before addressing my soon-to-be ex-wife. "This is my workplace, Celeste," I said evenly. "You can't just barge in here making scenes. You've destroyed everything," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "Donovan can't find work anywhere because of what you did to his reputation. His wife took their kids and moved to her mother's house. You've ruined an innocent man's life." "Innocent?" I stood up slowly, feeling my carefully controlled anger finally rising to the surface. "He's a married man who seduced multiple clients, including my wife. That's the definition of guilty." "It wasn't like that," she protested. What we had was real. It was love. It was adultery, I replied coldly. And now you both get to face the consequences of your choices. Celeste stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Who are you? The man I married would never be this cruel. The man you married trusted his wife. I shot back. That man died the day I watched you kissing another man at your tennis club. What you see now is what's left. She tried a different approach, her voice becoming soft and manipulative. Garrett, I know I hurt you, but destroying Donovan won't bring us back together. Can't we try to heal from this? There is no us anymore, I said firmly. Sign the divorce papers, Celeste. It's over. Her expression shifted from pleading to something harder. You know what? Fine. Maybe you're right. Maybe Donovan and I do deserve better than this vindictive nightmare you've created. Good luck with that, I replied. Hope unemployed tennis instructors with 2 kids and alimony payments are your type. She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Sloan. Celeste just called my office screaming about unfair tactics. I think she's finally realizing how screwed she really is. That evening, I sat in my empty house with a glass of whiskey, listening to the silence that had replaced 18 years of marriage. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something approaching peace. Tomorrow, the real consequences would begin. 2 weeks after Celeste signed the divorce papers, which she did reluctantly after Sloan explained exactly how much worse things could get if she fought us in court, I received the news I'd been waiting for. Donovan Pierce filed for bankruptcy yesterday. Sloan informed me during our final meeting. His wife got the house, full custody of the kids, and substantial alimony. He's living in a studio apartment and working at a sporting goods store. And Celeste, she's renting a 1-bedroom apartment across town. Her attempts to get spousal support were unsuccessful, given the circumstances of your divorce. I nodded, feeling a grim satisfaction. Justice had a mathematical precision that I found comforting. But the real victory came 3 weeks later, when I was leaving my studio after a particularly productive day. I just signed 2 new corporate clients for podcast production, and business was booming. As I walked to my truck, I spotted a familiar figure sitting on a bench across the street. It was Celeste, and she looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, and she had the hollow-eyed appearance of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. When she saw me, she stood up and approached hesitantly. Garrett, she said softly, could we talk for a few minutes? Against my better judgment, I stopped and waited. I wanted to apologize, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Not because I think it'll change anything, but because you deserve to hear it. I destroyed everything good in my life for a fantasy that wasn't even real. And Donovan? I asked. Her laugh was bitter. Gone. Turns out his declarations of love disappeared the moment he realized I couldn't help him financially. He's already moved on to another student, some divorced woman with money who thinks he's going to make her a tennis champion. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and surprisingly, I meant it. Not sorry enough to take her back, but sorry that she'd had to learn the hard way what kind of man she destroyed our marriage for. I know you won't believe this, she said, but losing you is the worst part of all of this. Not the money, not the house, not even losing Donovan. Realizing that I threw away the best man I'd ever known for someone who never really cared about me at all. I looked at her for a long moment, this woman who'd once been my partner, my best friend, my future. Now she was just someone I used to know, someone who'd made choices that led her to this bench, alone and broken. I believe you, I said finally, but it doesn't change anything. She nodded, tears starting to fall. I know. I needed you to know that I understand what I lost. After she walked away, I sat in my truck for a few minutes, processing the encounter. There was no satisfaction in seeing her broken, no sense of victory in her pain. There was just nothing. The anger that had sustained me through the divorce process had burned out, leaving behind a clean slate. That night, I called my sister to update her on the final chapter of the Celeste saga. How do you feel? Sloan asked. Free, I replied, and realized I meant it. For the first time in months, I was looking forward instead of backward. The studio was thriving. I had my self-respect intact, and the future was wide open. It had been an expensive education in human nature, but I'd learned the most important lesson of all. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. I was ready to move on. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my life had transformed in ways I never expected. The podcast studio was thriving beyond anything I'd imagined during my marriage. Corporate clients were lining up for content creation services, and I'd recently signed a deal to produce a weekly show for a major Denver tech company. More importantly, I'd rediscovered who I was outside of being Celeste's husband. The man who'd built a business from nothing, who'd fought for everything he'd earned, who refused to be anyone's doormat. That man was back, stronger than ever. "You look good, Garrett," Sloan said during our monthly dinner at her favorite downtown restaurant. "Better than you have in years." "I feel good," I replied, and meant it. It's amazing how much energy you have when you're not constantly wondering what your wife is hiding from you. Sloan raised her wine glass. To fresh starts and hard-learned lessons. We clinked glasses, and I reflected on how much had changed. The house felt like home again instead of a crime scene. I'd redecorated, removing all traces of Celeste's influence and creating spaces that reflected my actual tastes rather than our compromised aesthetic. "Speaking of fresh starts," Sloan said with that mischievous look that always meant trouble, "there's someone I'd like you to meet. She's a client of mine, recently divorced, owns her own marketing firm, and she's nothing like your ex-wife." "I'm not ready for that yet," I said automatically, but even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if they were still true. "When will you be ready?" she pressed. "It's been 6 months, Garrett. You're allowed to be happy again." That evening, I sat in my home office going through client files and thinking about Sloan's words. Was I ready to trust someone again? The idea still felt foreign, but for the first time since the divorce, it didn't feel impossible. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, my stomach tightened. Celeste had tried contacting me a few times over the months, usually when she was drinking and feeling nostalgic about our good times. But this message was different. "Hi, Garrett. This is Sarah Mitchell. Your sister gave me your number and said you might be interested in discussing a podcast project for my marketing firm. Would you have time for coffee this week to talk business?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Sloan wasn't subtle, but she wasn't wrong either. I was allowed to be happy again. I was allowed to trust again, carefully and with boundaries, but trust nonetheless. "Thursday afternoon works for me," I typed back. "There's a coffee shop near my studio that's great for business meetings." As I hit send, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year. Anticipation for the future. Not just professional success, but personal possibility. The man Celeste had betrayed was gone forever. But the man who'd survived her betrayal was ready for whatever came next. 1 year after signing the divorce papers, I received an unexpected phone call that brought the Celeste chapter of my life to its final close. "Garrett, it's Detective Morrison with Denver PD," the voice said. "I'm calling about your ex-wife, Celeste Whitlock. She's been arrested for embezzlement from her current employer." I sat down slowly, processing this information. Embezzlement. She was working for a small marketing firm and apparently thought she could skim money from client accounts without anyone noticing. Her employer pressed charges when they discovered over $15,000 missing. After hanging up, I called Sloan immediately. "I'm not surprised," she said when I told her the news. "People who can lie to their spouse's face for months usually don't have strong moral boundaries in other areas either." The irony wasn't lost on me. Celeste had destroyed our marriage for a man who'd used her and discarded her, and now she destroyed her career through her own greed and desperation. 2 weeks later, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in months. Lauren Pierce, Donovan's ex-wife. She was at the grocery store with her 2 children, looking healthy and confident in a way she hadn't when I'd first seen her during my surveillance. "Garrett Whitlock, right?" she said, recognizing me. "I know this might be awkward, but I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for exposing what my husband was really doing," she said firmly. "I know it probably wasn't about helping me, but you saved me years of being married to a serial cheater. My kids and I are much better off without him." I nodded, appreciating her directness. "How are you managing?" "Better than expected," she replied with a genuine smile. "I got a promotion at work, the kids are adjusting well, and we're actually happier now than we were before. Sometimes losing someone who doesn't deserve you is the best thing that can happen." Her words stayed with me as I drove home to the house that was truly mine now, to the business that was flourishing, to the life I'd built from the ashes of betrayal. That evening, Sarah Mitchell, the marketing firm owner Sloan had introduced me to, called to finalize details for our latest podcast project. What had started as a business relationship had slowly developed into something more meaningful over the past few months. "Are we still on for dinner Saturday?" she asked. "Absolutely," I replied, and realized I was genuinely looking forward to it. As I hung up the phone, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. Celeste's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but in the end, it had revealed my own strength. I'd fought for my dignity, protected what I'd built, and emerged victorious. The studio was more successful than ever. I had genuine friendships, a relationship with someone who shared my values, and most importantly, I had my self-respect intact. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something better from what's left behind. I'd learned that trust, once broken, could eventually be rebuilt, but only with people who'd proven they deserved it. And I'd learned that a man who knows his worth will never settle for less than he deserves again.